Hi, I'm Alistair Sims from Books on the Hill and Both Press. Together I'm with Off the Shelf Festival, talking to Steven Poore about his work with us and his books in general.
Hi, I'm Steven Poore. I'm an epic fantasist living in Sheffield, and I've written 2 novels and a book for Alistair's Books on the Hill Press, The Clockwork Eyeball.
But yeah, it's been a really interesting journey for us working with Steven. We've met each other quite a few years ago on the con circuit. And I was a big fan of his first few novels. I don't know if you knew that, but I actually nominated him for the Gemma Award for his first book.
Oh,
Talking to to Stan Nichols on it. So hopefully, yeah. So we're hopefully we'll get some awards in the future. I hope.
I hope so.
So yeah, the Clockwork Eyeball was a really fun book to read. It was one of my favorite stories when we started. I love the cover. The cover is just brilliant. Chrissy Harrison is the artist who did the cover with
He's
me.
knocked that one out of the park, to be honest.
To be honest, together I think we've knocked all the covers out of the park. They look absolutely amazing as a series, to be honest. It's been really exciting to do, and I think at the start with we're going to have a chat about the story, and Stephen's going to do a reading about the story.
The Clockwork Eyeball is a sort of it's an alternate Marrakesh. Back in 1958, various parts of history have changed before that. The Cold War rages on, Sputnik has just been launched, and a young lad named Saif has a mission to perform in the souks of Marrakesh. So he's got to take an agent to a cafe, pick up a young girl there who is being extradited, as it were, from Russia to the UK, and the Russians are on their tail. And somehow that all fits into what is quite a small book, but it reads really fast.
It was good. It was fun to read. I have to say, it was fun to read. And I what's nice for me is being dyslexic myself. I did a few readings of it myself when we first started. I don't know if you caught any of them, Stephen.
I didn't. I wish I had.
And I'm not very good at reading out loud at all. But it was easier than if I was trying to read any other book. So we'll probably do a reading now, and you'll read a little section, and hopefully everyone will enjoy it.
Okay, this is from around the middle. So the directorate had set up several roofed runs that took direct paths over the Medina, stretching out across the quiet gardens and messy shanties in a web of scaffold boards and discreet ramps. Even from the skies, an observer might not notice the routes they took, unless he already knew what to look for. Saif ran with the borrowed gun stuck through his belt, his hands free so he could upset and topple the bridges once they had passed over. The boards fell into unminded alleyways or were pulled back across where they bridged busier streets. He had no intention of causing innocent casualties. Zakopolova followed his directions almost wordlessly, even when he forgot to point the way forward. It was clear to him that she understood at least some English. On more than one occasion, she doubled back to help him withdraw a bridge, stubbornly and deliberately mishearing his protests. At least there was no immediate sign of pursuit, Saif thought. But given the intelligence and efficiency the Russians had shown so far, that didn't mean as much as it ought to have done. For all he knew, the Russians might be tracking them from the streets. He resisted the temptation to stop and watch over the side of the roof to see whether he was right. Indecision and hesitation were a man's worst enemies, El Fedil had taught him. He scanned the skyline. The Katubia was over there. So Goeles and the Bab de Kala were over there. He had a choice between making for the gate, which was closer and undoubtedly much faster, or for the Sharia Mohammed again, where he would be able to pick up a transport and a few escorts. As he caught his breath, the call to prayer sounded. Speakers atop the Ketubia started the cry, and it was taken up quickly by the mosques in the surrounding districts. Saif ducked his head in a quick obeisance and directed a prayer to the heavens. The thrumming vibration of Foxwood's spectacle case against his hip took him by surprise, and he tugged it from his pocket in alarm, half expecting it to explode in his face. Given Foxwood's actions today, he wouldn't have put that past the man. This was the case that housed the agent's spy moths, he remembered. What could agitate them so much that they would do this? Svetlana frowned back at him and grabbed his sleeve, trying to urge him onward again. He pulled himself free and jogged across the roof behind her, fiddling with the clasp that held the case closed. Svetlana ducked and shouted suddenly, and then Saif heard the buzzing at last. Russian spy wasps. They'd been found. Something buzzed past his ear as he closed the distance to join Svetlana at the edge of the roof. And he flinched, jerking to one side instinctively. Onto the street, he told her, running on the spot in a desperate attempt to spot the lethal insectoids. They can be confused down there. Svetlana nodded and swung her legs over the side of the roof without hesitation. There was a rickety wooden ladder that led down into an alleyway in the middle of one of the souks, and she descended it with ease. Saif made to follow, then hesitated. The case was vibrating even harder than before. He popped it open and threw it away from him with the same motion, flinging up one arm to cover his face just in case it did explode. He'd caught a glimpse of the spy moths whirring up into the sky, and then they split away, dancing in patterns he could not follow, chasing the Russian wasps. Elatedly thanking God, he swung onto the ladder. From here, the easiest way was probably towards the Sharia Muhammad. The souks would shield them both from any further attacks by Russian spy wasps. Deadly they might be, but they were quite useless in large crowds, unable to discriminate their targets from innocents. Are you all right, miss? He gasped as he caught up with the girl. She looked shaken, but he could not see the flush that signaled the presence of the fast-working toxins the Russians preferred. Da, yes. Quickly, please. He smiled despite his own exhaustion. Da, no problem, miss. There you go. And the chase continues.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. I enjoyed listening to it just as normal as I'm reading it. So dyslexia does affect like 1 in 10 people at a conservative value. And that's why, as both press, we really wanted to bring dyslexic-friendly fiction to adults, which there haven't been before. So being dyslexic, I've been around the block with many different people asking questions, and we basically went, there's nothing here. So we decided to do it ourselves, talking with Chrissy Harrison, discussing it, and then we started doing a Kickstarter. And one of the first authors we talked to was Steven to do this story. But we had lots of different authors, from Adrian Tosky to Stephen Seville to a great horror pair, which is John Loren Probert and Fana Nephew, who were my next door neighbours at the time. So that was useful. But it's very, very important to actually put out there. And it's not a difficult thing to do. It's very simple changes that we did to make it accessible for people with dyslexia. It's cream paper, it's spacing between paragraphs and sentences, and it's a font that is much easier to read. We did a bit of research before, asking what sort of fonts people would enjoy. And we didn't go for a dyslexic specific font. We went for a font that everyone seems to find easier and easier to read, because we didn't want to alienate anybody. So anyone who's dyslexic or not dyslexic could read it and still enjoy it. And that is not being patronizing. That's the most important. So the stories were edited, but not edited in a way to make it dyslexic friendly, but to make them the best story they could be. And so it was a hard thing to do in the end, because we had to do it on ourselves. And we did a successful Kickstarter, which funded, I think, 6 of the 8 books, so we had to put a bit of funding ourselves in at the end. And it went really well. We were now actually we're reprinting 2 of the titles already now. After, I don't think it's even, might be 2 years, maybe a year and a bit now since it's come out, year and a half, which
It's
is
a year and a
amazing.
half, I think.
Yeah, a year and a half, and we're reprinting 2 of the titles. It's amazing. So, and then we're doing more. We did a big push this year when we've tried to make it bigger and better, and get as big as authors as we can, so we can really push the agenda. And so we managed this year to get Bernard Cornwell to do have a story for us, which is just is a dream come true for me, as a massive fan. And then we got Peter James doing a story for us next year, and he did an introduction to all the new books. So it is great to have the profile now with the books. And I don't know if you can see from the video, but as you can see, it is much easier to read. And it's ragged edged. That's the other thing I thought to add. Most books are justified, which means all the spaces are different. That makes it actually very difficult for someone who's dyslexia or any eyesight issue to read the books, because everything's different. By having it ragged, it means all the spaces are equal. Makes it much easier to read. So yeah, it's been a really honor doing it with Steven, and it's been a great thing to do, and we're going to do more. If we can sell as many as we can to people and people enjoy them, we'll do more. That's the whole point.
Alistair, where are they stocked? Where can people get hold of them at the moment?
Anywhere they want to, because they're basically, this is the one thing we managed to do being a bookseller. It has to be in stock with the wholesaler's stock item. So any bookshop, any place that sells books can get them next day delivery. It's as simple as that. It is a really, really critical to us to have availability. So you can either get it from us, from Books on the Hill, so that's www.booksonthehill.co.uk, or you can get it from bookshop.org. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from W. Smith's. You can get it from Blackwell's, and you can get your library. We have them in libraries as well, so you can just go into your local library and try and get it. And if they don't have it in, they can get it in, and that's important.
That's brilliant. And it's important to support your local bookshops as well. So do go via bookshop.org. Do try searching them out, because the whole point is that they are in print. You can get them in print. And for a lot of dyslexic people I've talked to, yeah, you can get ebooks. You can reconfigure text on your e-reader, but you're very much restricted to just buying from one certain shop online. And what is wrong with wanting to go into bookshops as a dyslexic person and buy books? You should be able to do that.
And I understand it is scary. I do understand it. It's not an easy thing to go into a bookshop when you're dyslexic with all these books around, and they're all big and fat, and there's a lot of things which you wouldn't read there because they're quite difficult. It's not easy, because I have books I can't read. I don't know about you, Steve, but I can't read Rose Tremaine. I find her seriously difficult to read because the way she writes, very well written, but she plays around with tenses. She goes back and forth and past tense without any signposts, and she changes up the punctuation of the sentences, which again makes it difficult for me, because the only way I can read is skim reading, academic skim reading. So I don't read the is, does, it's, that sort of words. So if they change all those punctuations off, I miss a step and I have to start, stop, and that means that I lose any cohesion of a sentence, any cohesion of a story that I'm reading. So be brave if you can. To go in the bookshop. Not most booksellers are lovely people who are going to be very supportive of you. And if you feel it's too much, go into the library. They will have books there for you as well, and they're there for you to help you. It's very important.
I feel it's important to note as well that this range isn't talking down to people at all. These are adult books written by mainstream authors. These are not treating you like you are children in the slightest, because this is the other thing you've told me before. You've told me that as a dyslexic person, you feel that there isn't a range for adults to read, that dyslexic people are essentially abandoned once they get out of school.
Yeah, Bound Stokes is brilliant. They do 14 downwards, really, which is most of the school stuff. We are engaging with schools at the moment, trying to get the secondary schools involved and specialist schools involved, and adult learning is a big thing we want to try and get into. Part of the problem is I haven't got a lot of time to advertise as much and do all the stuff because I run a bookshop at the same time, so it's quite difficult. But no, it's not patronizing, which is, I think, the most important thing. They are for adults. In fact, I saw about half an hour ago, I sold a Dyslexia Friendly book for our website, which is quite fun. And I think yesterday I sold one of your books as well to someone. So it's interesting how it works. But it's also the fact these books are for people dyslexic, but they're also for people who aren't dyslexic. And that's the thing. There's a rise of novellas in and short stories across the board, especially in fantasy and sci-fi, and people buy them regularly. This is what these are. They are short stories, novellas, which happen to be formatted to make it easier to read for someone who's dyslexic. So it doesn't mean if you're not dyslexic, you can't read it. It's very easy. And then also there's people who have eye issues, who have actually had strokes. This again, I've had people who come in who've had a stroke or had known had a stroke who bought them for them because it's much easier for them to read. But they don't want to be patronized. They don't want to have something dumbed down for them. They have a large vocabulary. They want to read something with decent story and plot line. So it's the whole point is to make something which is achievable, which is the size. Because to be honest, if you have something about this thick, when it comes to this thick, it can be scary. Even I find it scary. Even people who are not dyslexic and read lots find big books scary occasionally. So having something small but enough to feel like it's something you've achieved is great. It means you can finish a book. We had a review actually recently, not of your book unfortunately, but of Steven Saville's book. He's been trying to read crime. The friend of this person's been trying to read crime and couldn't get past a few pages. And they bought his book, Steven Saville's book, for his friend, who read it in one sitting during the day. Haven't finished a book before. First book they really finished reading, and they loved it. And it made a huge difference to them. And that's exactly the whole point of these books as well. But basically, our stories are between 8 and, at the moment, I think 16 to 20,000 words. So the Bernard Cornwell one we've done, which is our thickest one we've done, is about 16 to 18,000 words, which is a good sort of little novella sort of thing size. You probably can do a bit more than that, but not, because that's about nearly 200 pages, 150, 200 pages. You can do them larger. I don't agree with them being larger, because I think it misses the purpose of the psyche of someone who's dyslexic. So yeah, it's definitely when you have to understand someone who's dyslexic, and being dyslexic myself, there is a fear of something that is larger. When it is too large, it becomes an impossible task to finish that book. And that is not just catered to people who are dyslexic, but of lots of different people who read. So there's a lot of people who have no problems reading, but actually still find it very intimidating to read a large book. A lot of fantasy sci-fi tends to be quite large nowadays. Remember, technically, a novel starts at 50,000 words, technically. So novels now are 90, 100 plus, going towards 200,000-300,000 words. So you have to understand the psyche of people and understand the psyche, how they're going to react to something. So having it smaller, but not too small, but small enough that it means they can finish it and not feel intimidated, but still feel a sense of accomplishment when they finish it, is, I think, very important. And it's something sometimes people can miss. They think, oh, let's put this massive novel into a dyslexic format. Yeah, won't work. One, practical issues. So if you have a 200,000 word novel, it'll be too big anyway. And you have to then split it into volumes, which again then costs of doing it, and people have to buy multiple volumes. People don't like doing that. Of if it's just one book, when they could get it in one. So I think you have to use your head and think different ways around it. I think there might be a place for larger books, but I think in a commercial sense and a psychological sense, I'm not into that myself.
It's kind of served by ebooks in a way as well. If, for example, you take the physical books as being more of an introduction and getting people back into reading, if they're more comfortable reading longer things, then they can potentially use e-readers to read the longer things.
It's all mediums. It's all the mediums, different mediums you have. So audio is brilliant. I've just been finishing listening to audio, and I love it when you got multiple voices and it's fun. I find very difficult to listen to audio if it's a single narrator just doing it and reading the story. I like it when there's a bit of acting in it. But then there's ebooks as well, which is great, and it helps a lot of people doing it. The fact is we haven't had any physical books for people at all, and that's really sad if you think about it. And to be honest, it's a sad moment still that we're still, our books we do, the 12 books we have, the only easily available dyslexic friendly fiction for adults in the whole of the UK. It's great for us, but it's really sad.
It needs to be shouted about more, and it needs more support.
And it has to be done by the big publishers.
Yeah.
We're absolutely. a little minnow in a big pond going, yay! And we don't have the media presence. We don't have the funds to do what they can do. If they started doing, let's say, 5 dyslexic friendly fiction books for adults a year, 4 publishers, that's 5, 10, 20 dyslexic friendly fiction books a year coming out regularly. That's not a lot of books, to be honest, for a publisher to come out with. And they're quite simple to do. They're shorter, so printing is not going to be that difficult for them in page numbers in that sense. And also they print on a vast quantity, which means the cost goes down, which means each book can be reduced in price, which means it's much easier for people to get them. So it's just, as I said, it's the big fish or the big sharks need to do something. And I as I said many a times to them, I'm very happy to work with them. I'm very happy to consult, to work, to make it happen with them. Because that's what I want to do. I want to have many books of dyslexia friendly out there for the public, for people to read. It's a passion for me.
You've mentioned serialized books. One that comes to mind is actually Stephen King's The Green Mile, which originally came out as a 6-part series of shorter works. To my mind, that would be almost an ideal title for putting into a sort of a dyslexic friendly range, because that is a mainstream title. It's already designed to be divided up into individual volumes.
There's another one, Stark, who does Nunslinger, which is a load of novellas together in a big book. Brilliant stories.
Stark Holborn.
Yeah, that's Stark Holborn. It's brilliant stories. I love them. And they would be brilliant as a serial of dyslexia funny books. And also I've obviously talked to Stephen about doing a sequel one day. Um, and I have talked to a number of us on that regards, because especially if you've created the world and you can do little stories inside that world, and that's something that a lot of fantasy and sci-fi authors tend to do anyway, to be honest. The difficult part is getting stories from the other genres. So there's less short stories around of historical fiction. There's less short stories around of crime. And there's definitely less short stories of romance that I can use at the moment, or other things which people might want to enjoy. So it's or contemporary fiction as well, unless they're really short. So you either have some which like 5,000 words contemporary fiction, really sort of big name doing, not quite, it's a bit too small for us, if that makes sense. So yeah, serialization is something to think about, but also you've got to remember that you've got a cost of doing it as well. So you've got to keep doing it, and getting the funds to do it is also difficult. This is the thing, as a publisher, I've got to think about: can I afford to do this? Can I afford to do that? Because I'm a tiny little thing who's actually at the moment funding from our own bookshop, so it's a bit more difficult than actually doing it any other way. So I have to be very choicey and very clever on how I do it. So I got all these ideas. I can't necessarily do them at the moment. I hope I can in the future, but it may take several years before I get another Steven Poore book out, because I have to be able to actually be able to publish it. And
And
Stephen,
I
of
have to
course,
write it.
that is true. That is true. And people are busy. Many authors, we've asked many authors to do this, and it's not they didn't want to do it. They're just busy. They haven't got the time sometimes, because they've got huge. Some of them have got contracts with publishers, but they've got to write 3 books a year. Right. So the interesting thing is there's lots of different things I want to do, on not just fiction. I want in the future to perhaps do some factual books for dyslexia, because then there aren't any factual books for dyslexia, even for kids, really that much. So but that takes a lot of work, and it's going to cost a lot of money, because of the illustrations, because you have to, if you're doing a book for ages 10 to 14, you're going to have the illustrations. It's just has to have. And finding the right academics to write them, and then also I've got to edit it. I have to use my own academic notes, because I have a PhD in history and archaeology. I have a book coming out next year, so I have done editorial for academic works. But it will take time. It'll take me a year or two to actually edit these things, as well as do everything else. So that's something far in the future I want to do. On a more immediate future, we have 3 books coming out next year. So we have a Sherlock Holmes, one of the original short stories, which I'm really looking forward to doing. We have Peter James, which I'm again really excited to do as well. And then we've got James Bennett with his Arthurian LGBT romp, which I am is a good story. I really enjoyed that one.
I am looking forward to seeing more in James's medieval world.
It's a very saucy and a very graphic a little bit LGBT story in Arthurian world. It's brilliant. It's fun. That's what you want. I'm looking forward to that. And then obviously I've got a few names I'm thinking about in the future. So there's Alex Shaw I've been talking to. There's who else? Anna Smith Spark, again, been talking to. Emma
Again,
Newman,
a mainstream fantasy author who is actually dyslexic.
Yeah,
as well.
she is. And she Alzheimer's, not Alzheimer's, I can't remember the word. It's a sort of autistic Asperger's syndrome. That's it.
Yeah.
As well. Karen Maitland I've been talking to as well, mainstream historical fiction author who's also dyslexic. Who's actually, I have to say, one of the loveliest persons I've ever met. I'm talking to Harry Sidebottom, I'm talking to Ben Kane, I'm talking to sort of actual mainstream authors if I can, to talk to them and see if we can do anything. They may not have time, which is fair enough. That happens. So and then I'll be looking at sub-licensing as well, from publishers, and I do actively want publishers to engage with me, and make it easier for me to actually access things. So I talked to Hache here with Stark Holborn. Um,
So what you're saying really is that Books on the Hill Press is not going away, and this is one that we can engage with in the future.
yes, hopefully the costs will come a little bit down because it's
Yeah.
very expensive at the moment. So there might be points where I have to stop a little bit and wait and then come back again a little bit more because as all publishers are feeling the squeeze, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just can't ride it out as much as they can. Um, so, and I don't want to skimp on quality. That's the biggest point. I don't want a skimp on quality, which means it might take a bit of time to do things. It's as simple as that. So it's and there's a few more things I want to do. I want to do some experiments into academic stuff. So having proper academic papers in dyslexic friendly format for access. And that's something I'll have to talk to universities about and try and see if they want to do a project with me and help fund that. But yeah, we'll see on that regard. And I'm sure, Steve, you've got so much more you've got to do now.
Oh wow. I have got a new novel that I'm kind of shopping around publishers at the moment. Basically a fairy tale sat on a narrowboat. That's, if that finds a home, I will be absolutely over the moon. I've been working with the British Fantasy Society to judge their short story competition this year and next year. So actively running that. And at some point next year, the Sheffield Science Fiction and Fantasy Socials will return. Meetups in person somewhere in Sheffield where you will hear SF authors reading from their works.
So one thing I will say is, so as I said, my books for publishing, you can get from, as we said before, all different good booksellers, and some bad booksellers as well if you want to, and of course us as well. It's at our direct line is www.booksonthehill.co.uk, and we're based in Clevedon. And Stephen's books, this one is available to get. Please do, even if you're not dyslexic, buy it as well because you enjoy the story. It's great. And I think Grimbold publish your other novels, and they're available as well from Grimbold.
Grimbold Books publish Heir to the North and The High King's Vengeance, both of which are also in the Sheffield library system. So if you can't find them via bookstores, you can find them in Sheffield Library.
I'll add to that, if you go into Sheffield Library and you don't see his book, the Dyslexic Funny Books in, go and speak to them and tell them to get them in, because it's on the system and they can get it in very easily.